They say that good things come in threes. The Return of the King, Thor Ragnarok, Toy Story 3, The Witcher 3, Super Mario Bros. 3. The question is, will the third and almost final game in the .hack.gu last recode trilogy in a bit make it onto this list? My name is Graeldon, and I'm reviewing Steam games in alphabetical order to find the hidden gems among the piles of garbage, and today we're reviewing the second game from .hack//gu last recode, .hack//gu Redemption. Let's begin. Because of the plot-heavy nature of these games, this video is going to assume that you've already watched at least the last video so that you have some idea of the general plot. As a reminder though, .hack Reminisce released on the 8th of May 2007 and .hack Redemption released on the 10th of September 2007. That's roughly 4 months apart, which is both impressive and worrying. In the space of only 4 months, how much could be improved? Was there even time for improvement, or was the game already done this close to the release date? Let's take a look at the general plot and what, if anything, has changed between Part 2 and Part 3. Reminisce ended with Haseo and friends defeating Ovan and realizing that they hadn't actually solved the problem of the Lost Ones. Redemption begins with a definitely not dead Ovan in a white room, monologuing to a young girl in a rocking chair. This is Aina, Ovan's sister, not to be confused with Ida, the out-of-control AI program causing problems everywhere in the world. That said, Aina is infected by Ida, which was caused by Ovan getting infected by Ida while caring for Aina, so Ovan has been trying to find a way to cure Aina and stop Ida. Not confusing at all. Now, there are of course going to be major spoilers for the trilogy in this video, so be warned, you may find them disappointing. Not only is Ovan not dead, it turns out that Sakaki is also not dead. We did get to see his satisfying quote-unquote death at the end of Part 2 where he tumbled backwards into the abyss, but we should have known that that wouldn't be the last of him. This is a game after all, of course he'd just respawn. And to make matters worse, he's been infected by Ida, and the company behind the world has decided to put him in charge as the new moderator rather than Yata. Apparently he convinced them that he can control Ida, which seems to be partially true. Anyway, Sakaki immediately creates everyone's worst nightmare, a third tournament arc. So, we've got our premise, and aside from the mandatory tournament arc, it's not too bad. It humanizes Ovan somewhat by helping us to understand his motives. Who wouldn't want to try and save their little sister by sending their friends into a spiraling depression by putting their girlfriend into a coma? So, we're left with the question, what has changed between these two games? As before, the graphics, pre-rendered cutscenes and music all continue to be lovely. However, we begin to see some issues with the graphics where it looks like they've had to cut some corners. For example, sticking to the MMORPG theme of regular expansions and updates, a new town hub called Breg Epona has opened up. Sadly, this area has little to do with The Legend of Zelda or Celtic mythology and is instead a city in the sky, and lovely in its own right. It's a great town to explore with its airship landing, marketplace and alleyways, but it also has issues, like these flags that don't even touch the roof of the building they're on. I also started seeing more glaring texture seams, even visible in some cutscenes, and things like flickering textures. Nothing game-breaking, but certainly immersion-breaking. Keep an eye out as this video continues, and I'm sure you'll see many more examples. Along with the new town hub, we also get not just one, but 2 new types of areas. A forest filled with mysterious ruins, and the outer dungeons, only accessible via a new ability called area hacking. Both of these areas look great, but don't really introduce anything new. In the forest areas, you'll sometimes encounter traps, which only require a couple of brain cells to avoid, and the outer dungeons have energy gates that will block your way after charging up for a few seconds. Additionally, outer dungeons are only accessed from within other areas and are, at least from what I found, always related to the plot. You won't find them when exploring normally. Because of this, they're almost exclusively found at the end of a normal dungeon and consist of a single floor. The game also reuses the same outer dungeon twice in a row at the start of the game, which was pretty disappointing. In addition to accessing outer dungeons, area hacking can also be used to find hidden items by tapping a button whenever the screen goes a bit glitchy. These are usually just extra consumables to add to your already overflowing item bag and will probably never be used. On the bright side, I do like the visual effect of these spaces, pulling the textures into them and warping them like some kind of tiny black hole. What about combat then? Well, in my opinion, it gets a bit of a downgrade. After a certain story event that we'll discuss shortly, Haseo receives yet another job extension, and with it, a new weapon to play with. dual pistols. From what I can tell, the intent with these is to give Haseo a more mobile attack option, and this is coupled with a new dash ability, and in all fairness, the extra movement options do feel good. Additionally, the pistols can chain off the back of a weapon skill from any other weapon, allowing you to do some extra damage. The problem is that it's proportionally much weaker, and it re-equips the pistols when I'd much rather use the scythe with its overpowered healing abilities. It's a great idea in theory, allowing you to combo skills together, but it's very limiting for playstyles, and I rarely ever actively wanted to use that feature. If it had let me chain together any two weapon skills, then that would have been a different story. Along with the new weapons, Haseo also gets a new outfit, moving away from the black, spiky, edgy armor and into a softer white cloth look. This is meant to represent the change in his nature as he's learning to let go of his rage. All I see is 2 CDs taped to his butt. There's a couple more combat changes to cover. Firstly, there's a new awakening available. Gone are the button mashing and the ties to the affection meters, and instead we have a simple cutscene where Haseo uses the power of Scathe to deal a devastating blow. Using this multiple times will upgrade its strength, so spam it whenever that morale gauge is full. You can now ignore the affection mechanic until the very end of the game, more on that later. You'll want to use Avatar Awakening as much as possible because it also gives you Virus Cores, a currency used to upgrade the special lost weapon that each character has. These lost weapons were introduced in part 2, and there you needed to find keys that were scattered randomly in dungeons, then fight a high level monster to acquire the weapon. I got 2 of them, one for Haseo and one for Atali. .hack Redemption retcons all of that and just gives you all of the weapons at the start of the game. If you had taken the time to grind out all the weapons in .hack Reminisce, you have my sympathy. These weapons are great in theory. They require reasonably significant time and effort to acquire them. The Celestial weapons in Final Fantasy X are great examples of these, being some of the best weapons in the game, and they feel like they were worth the effort to obtain. Conversely, the fact you get the lost weapons for free at the start of Redemption no matter what you did in Reminisce feels like a slap in the face. Regardless, you can enhance these weapons up to 3 times with Virus Cores, and at the final level you'll need to fight a super boss. Here's footage of me fighting one of these after reaching the max level of 150. Woo, so challenging. So, what else is new? Well, there's a couple of minor things as well as some post-credits content, but to talk about that we'll need to wrap up what happens with the plot. As I was saying earlier, after unceremoniously kicking Yata out of the role of GM, Sakaki the Sadistic is hosting a PKer-focused tournament in a vain attempt to get revenge on Haseo, like some kind of power-crazed Reddit mod. He has changed the rules so that many of the safe towns are now PvP zones, and we even have to save Gaspard and Syllabus from PKers, but that's basically it. We're never attacked in towns, never ambushed, and there's no sense of danger or urgency, which means this is a massive missed opportunity. The game immediately goes into its regular groove of alternating story beats with excuses to grind levels, introducing the same handful of side quests that we've now had in all 3 games. Regardless, we cruise our way through the tournament despite Sakaki doing his best to take us down, and even going so far as to try and turn the entire gaming community against Haseo by framing him as a hacker. This ultimately fails, and Haseo uses Scathe to strip Sakaki of his Ida powers. Haseo and crew manage to track down Yata, who awakens his avatar, which is promptly defeated by Haseo and Scathe, and Yata is then reinstated as the game moderator. In the meantime, Aina's Ida infection seems to have worsened, and she goes missing, sending Ovan into a panic. After chasing Aina for a while, Haseo and friends manage to track Ovan to his hideout and confront him. This battle plays out almost exactly the same as the fight at the end of .hack Reminisce, only this time we're able to thoroughly defeat Ovan, triggering the release of his avatar's fail-safe ability, the Rebirth. It turns out this is what Ovan was after all along. The Rebirth triggers a reset of the world, which wipes out Ida entirely, once and for all. But for some reason it doesn't affect any of the players, despite needing to affect the players in order to remove their Ida infections. Maybe that was explained and I missed it, but I feel like it's a point they've simply glossed over. Like how they had Sakaki show footage of Scathe to the public, ignoring the fact that it was established in part 1 that only other Epitaph users can see avatars. Or maybe Ida infected players can too? Who knows? At the end of the day, this massive energy surge destroys Ovan and nearly wipes out Haseo too. He's saved at the last minute by Zelkova, the mysterious leader and apparently master hacker of Moontree, and obtains his mandatory mid-game job extension that we discussed earlier. We also arrive in the Net Slum, the home for hackers in the world. It's a pretty cool place, and many of the NPCs have screens for faces, using various symbols in the place of eyes to create expressions. Or, in many cases, boobs. It's not just me, right? Those are definitely boobs. There's not a lot to do here when we initially arrive, but later we'll have access to the best shops, a teleporter with access to all the different areas, and the Canard Guild even ends up relocating here. At this point, the plot kicks off the final act. Ovan's death has resulted in a power imbalance, and the biggest, baddest evil in the game has awakened and is beginning to destroy the very fabric of the game itself. And it could even bleed into the wider internet, essentially making it an AIDA 2.0. This big bad is called the Anti-Existence, which is by itself a very cool name. And it's then ruined by the realization that its actual name is Cubia, a significantly and decidedly less cool name than the Anti-Existence. Anyway, this thing is basically overloading the internet as it grows in power, causing havoc to everything associated with it. Banks, electricity, water, and even somehow nuclear power plants, which according to this in-game diagram are, well, everywhere. I know that they need it to seem dramatic, but they could have at least used an accurate map. Neither Australia or Canada have any nuclear power plants at all, and I'm sure a handful of other markers are, well, off the mark. And before you argue that it's sci-fi and it's set in the future, they actually confirm a few moments earlier that Dot Hack Redemption is set in the far-flung future of 2017. Time to start wrapping things up. Cubia is releasing a bunch of Gamoras into the world, so Zelkova and Haseo recruit as many people as possible to fight back and give Haseo's team a chance to go after the main body. This includes Alcade, who for no logically explained reason is no longer comatose. It's an emotional reunion, but without any of the emotional weight, as it feels entirely undeserved. I assumed that she was revived when Ida was wiped out, but then why hasn't Shino come back? Why didn't Alcade send a message or reach out to anyone? She knew to meet up here, so she could have done something. Anything. I suppose she was too busy fulfilling the tsundere trope. There's a series of 4 areas to clear out, and in each one our old friends from throughout the game arrive to help us out. So we go after the main body, tracking it down and using an area hack to access its lair. Now, I should mention that at this stage the game does give you a point of no return warning and suggests saving in a fresh save slot, and while I appreciate this as it removes any ambiguity, it's also not the first time the game has done it. The first time was before Cubia was awakened at the cathedral door. It was at this point that I went and leveled up to 150 and completed a bunch of side content, but that actually wasn't the first point of no return warning. The very first one was just before the fight with Ovan, and I think there were actually a few others. Not confusing at all. Anyway, the fight with Cubia is actually pretty neat and is split into 3 parts, and is fairly challenging even at max level. Well, 2 out of 3 fights are anyway, but it's not like they'd make the 3rd and final fight the easiest, right? Right? The first section of the fight is played out using Skaith in yet another upgraded form. And what do we get this time? A bit of an area of effect added to the melee attacks, and an admittedly cool multi-lock-on attack for the arm cannon. Everything else remains the same. It's a challenging fight though, and I actually died once here. We then move inside Cubia and into a series of battles against our doppelgangers. You're actually forced to leave behind members of your party after each fight, but don't worry, they all survive. Just make sure you keep your best 2 for the final fight. Now, in the background, I'm going to play the footage of this fight so you can see it in all its glory. Why? Well, because compared to the first 2 phases, the 3rd and final phase is ridiculously easy if you've taken the time to reach max level. While phase 1 and 2 are scaled up to match your current level, it appears they forgot to do the same for phase 3. Which means that while I'm sure this fight has some interesting mechanics, I probably never saw the majority of them. You will need to defeat the arms one at a time before you're able to attack the main body, and you may notice that the arm dies before I can even finish the weapon combo. In fact, I'd estimate that the majority of this fight consists of attack animations where Cubia is untargetable. Don't get me wrong, the music and the visuals are amazing. The fight makes good use of the stage by having Cubia dive bomb the arena, forcing you to block and avoid taking too much damage. That said, the damage barely tickled Haseo, and all of the adds that it spawned died in a single hit. In fact, when the main body lands on the stage to make its penultimate attack, I don't even get a chance to use a weapon skill on it, as it dies after a measly 2 swings of the scythe. There's more waiting during the next animation, and a pretty cool phase transition, and then my next weapon skill that has multiple attacks lands a critical hit for 9,999 damage on the first strike, killing it instantly and leaving Haseo flailing wildly in the air, which I think is an apt way to describe the experience of fighting this disappointment of a final boss. The final duration for the fight is 1.5 minutes, which means that for an experience that is meant to end the game with a bang, .hack Redemption goes out with a whimper. You might be forgiven for thinking that the credits mean you've finished the game, but you'd be wrong. There is some post-game content to be found, so let's discuss what's on offer and then wrap up this trilogy review. Firstly, you've got an opportunity to continue exploring and leveling, so I used this as a chance to become the Grandmaster at Crimson Versus. And what do you think my reward was? If you guessed absolutely nothing, you're pretty close. You get a card. Awesome. Alright, what else? Well, secondly, you get the ability to marry a party member. I think you might be able to marry whoever you want, regardless of gender, which is pretty neat, but I didn't actually test it. I went with Atali. I'm sure it's the most boring choice possible, but she's been with Haseo since the beginning of the game and helped him to grow and mature, so it just feels right. Well, the ceremony is almost as disappointing as the final boss was. A short cutscene, some happy snaps, and an achievement. What annoys me the most is that they went to the effort of creating a unique outfit for Atali, but couldn't be bothered to do anything for Haseo. The post-game content isn't going well so far, but the game has one final trick up its sleeves: the Forest of Pain. You get invited here by Tabby, a character we're meant to know from somewhere, presumably the anime that takes place before the events of the game. It's a neat Easter egg for fans of the show, but a bit odd for people with no exposure to it. The Forest of Pain is a multi-floor dungeon with a mini-boss fight every 5 floors and a challenge to complete across the 4 floors preceding it. It's a neat challenge if you really want to push your limits, however it really hammers home how little variety there is in the level design. I made it to the 50th floor and found Tabby taking a nap. After a short cutscene, she gives you her member address and becomes a playable character. There are 15 more floors of increasing difficulty after this that end in a super boss, but you know what? Screw that. I'm not the completionist. Just by doing this, I've already gone above and beyond finishing the game, and I did it because I wanted to give the game a chance to redeem itself. Instead, it just let me down. I know I'm sounding negative about it, but the truth is that I enjoyed myself with this trilogy. It tells a great, albeit flawed story, with some memorable characters. The plot is a bit too ambitious for its own good though, and would have benefited from being stripped back somewhat to give more love and care to the side quests. I would have loved some more personal stories relating to each party member. If I had to describe the game with a single word, I would choose competent. There's nothing that it does particularly wrong, but it's not really amazing at anything either. I can see why this franchise has a bit of a cult following, but at the same time I can also see why it was overshadowed, nay, eclipsed by the other releases that came out around the same time. If you're a fan of JRPGs and anime and are partial to a bit of a mindless grind, I think you will have a good time with this game. But if you're looking for something revolutionary, you won't find it here. I would consider the trilogy overall to be equivalent to 3 seasons of anime in a trench coat, pretending to be a JRPG. Overall, I'd have to say that the trilogy had a rough start, peaked in part 2, and as for part 3, well, my final rating for .hack GU//redemption is Cubia out of 10. It's meant to be the biggest and most exciting part of the game, but ultimately, it's just a pair of flying balls. Now, if you excuse me, I still have one more game to play to wrap up this review. Welcome to the end of the video. A massive thank you to all the channel members on screen for supporting the channel, especially our 2 Knights of the Holy Grail, Freaky Feline and Loveheart Gonzi. If you'd like to become a member, you can do so for as little as $1 per month. Just click the join button to see the available membership levels and perks. Thank you for joining me on this weird gaming adventure through the depths of Steam, and I'll see you next time in the 4th and final part of the Dot Hack Trilogy in a bit. Until then, take care.